Let's get to the story here about the backlash that is coming. So there are a number of people that are speaking out right now. I know we had TYT meltdown. That's a big deal too as well. That's a part of this story. But a lot of people are speaking out after they saw the interview with Kamala Harris. And we're going to start with Chris Smalls. So everybody remembers Chris Smalls. He organized the union at Amazon warehouse in New York. Chris Smalls has been very vocal about this. And this is what he said after the interview last night. Kamala telling y'all last night that she would consider having a Republican in her cabinet basically states she wants part of that Project 2025. Pay attention. Listen to this. This is interesting. Kamala telling y'all last night that she would consider having a Republican in her cabinet basically states she wants parts of that 2025, that Project 2025. Pay attention. And her answers were weak as fuck. We deserve better. That's Christian Smalls, who has come out and has support Democrat politicians numerous times. Christian Smalls has been very vocal about, calling out the genocide in Gaza and not just settling for whatever. So he's been very vocal about this. He's one of them. And then we're going to get into TYT because they had some things to say. Cenk Uygur and Anna had some things to say about Kamala's interview. And let's just get into it. Here's part of the meltdown, because again, Kamala is not doing what they wanted her to do. And she's definitely not being as progressive as they wanted her to be as well. She's moving to the right. Listen to this.
So she, starts off answering that question by focusing on climate policy, and she says that her values have not changed. What did you make of that answer, Cenk?
Yeah, it's a good, savvy answer that's not really true. So look, guys, politicians change their policies based on the times. So is Kamala Harris a very standard politician? Yes. Did she say that she was for Medicare for all, whether she believed it or not, when she thought it was popular in 2020? Yes. Is she now against it because it's no longer popular, in her mind at least? The polling shows it's still popular, but these knuckleheads in Washington think, oh no, everybody in Washington doesn't like it. So has she changed it because of that? Yes, definitely. So what's your value? Is it universal healthcare or not universal healthcare? Which one is it? So the reality is, if you're gonna go with that line of talking points, then you've got to come back and say why your value is the same about universal health care and when and how you're going to get it. Not, I'm not in favor of it anymore. So I don't really believe her. By the way, Anna, I think the optics of the double interview with her and Tim Walz is terrible.
Yeah, and people are getting on our case for, in my opinion, just stating the obvious. People will argue, well, no, it's commonplace for every presidential ticket to have a sit-down interview with both individuals involved. That is true, that is a tradition. In a situation in which the front runner, right, the top of the ticket, in this case it would be Kamala Harris, actually gave other sit-down interviews on her own, by herself.
Yeah, look, guys.
Right, to that point, this is something I was calling out last night, you guys. That's the thing. Typically, when Obama ran, he had his own interviews, solo interviews by himself before Joe Biden joined him with those interviews. Same thing when Donald Trump ran, is the same thing when Joe Biden ran for president, right? Kamala joined him later on, but to do the first interview with Tim Walz, it makes it look like you're afraid to stand on your own. And we know she hasn't performed as well in interviews in the past. But it doesn't send a message to people that you're ready to be president. It sends a message to people that you have to lean on Tim Walz to get through this first interview. So no, that was not a good look.
Just know this going forward for today and for the rest of the election coverage. I'm not interested in blue or red MAGA. I'm not interested in dealing with your emotional needs, okay? So people may do double interviews. Trump and Vance did one. I tore it apart, right? But is that when you're looking for the main interview, the first interview she's gonna do after all this hype about how she's not doing interviews, then she uses Tim Walz as a crutch. It doesn't look good for Kamala Harris.
Thank you.
And by the way, if you're blue MAGA, do you understand that when you say, hey, things could be better if she did it this way. That's not trying to hurt her. That's trying to help her. Like, hey, but if you want to say, hey, do it the dumb way. Oh, I bet that'll help. Whichever way's the dumbest way that's going to cost her votes, please do it that way. As long as she said it, oh, rah, rah, rah. Your rah-rahs do not help. Objective reality and how to win an election helps, okay? If you think that's bad, wait till you get a load of what I'm going to say about Red MAGA later in the show.
So yesterday or last night after the interview, people were melting down like online, and there is a such thing called constructive criticism. And I do feel like people were getting angry because there were commentators that were giving Kamala Harris constructive criticism, and Blue MAGA just came out and was like, what do you expect her to do? I mean, she's just one person. She's a human being. People can make mistakes, you know. What did you expect from her? Leave her alone. I'm just like, yikes. You guys are like in a cult. I said the same thing of people like constantly defend everything that Trump does instead of accepting and being open to that constructive criticism. That becomes cult-like to me, right? And no one is above criticism. No one is above feedback. And that's something that really should help you. But people lost it last night. Like after people were critiquing her interview, people like lost their freaking minds. And yes, I think that there is something to be said for that, especially if you want to be the first female president. You have to show people that you can stand on your own. So all of the male presidents have done that. You have to show people that you can stand on your own. And I did not see that from Kamala Harris last night.
So we do the truth here. Now, when you look at the optics of it, now that you can see it with your own eyes, it was always a bad idea. But now she looks like she's at the kids' table. Walz's chair is so much higher. That's an awkward table. Dana Bash is facing Tim Walz. Kamala Harris should be looking strong and in charge. Yep. Instead, she looks like she's at the side of the table, side of the conversation. It makes her look weaker, not stronger. Please just stop cheerleading for whoever's in charge because you think that helps. It doesn't. Use independent judgment.
Speaking of independent, this election, if you are a hardcore partisan, is not about you. I know that's a hard pill to swallow, but you're not the important one in this election. Electorally speaking, you're actually pretty irrelevant. Every move that Donald Trump makes, every move that Kamala Harris makes is meant to attract the swing voters, the independent voters. So you have to think in that regard whenever you're judging whether or not the candidate that you prefer is performing well. It's not about performing well for you as a hardcore partisan. You've already made up your mind. The election comes down to a tiny sliver of independent voters who have not made up their minds yet.
Yeah, look guys, to that point, and again, I'm gonna keep breaking hearts here, but it's
So he says he's going to keep breaking hearts because the reality is Cenk Uygur and Anna were pretty excited when Biden stepped out of the race and Kamala Harris was the new nominee for the Democratic Party. They were pretty excited about that. They were like, okay, great. Now all she has to do is differentiate herself, you know, explain to people how she's different from Biden. They had believed that she would be different on Gaza. And then obviously we all know that wasn't true. I never believed that though, but they had believed that she would be different in that respect. They believed that, you know, she's going to be more progressive. They were one of the ones that were calling her progressive, by the way. So they were excited when Kamala announced. And so now it almost kind of feels like they're melting down a bit because it's not just the interview, it's everything else that has come along with it. It's the Israel issue, right? It's what she said about Gaza, not being willing to not give weapons to Israel. It's that because they believed that she was going to be further to the left on that issue, and that was not the case. I don't know why people thought that, because if you would have just followed the money, you would have known that was not the case. If you want to know how a candidate is going to perform about a particular issue, all you have to do is look at who their donors are, and that answers the question for you. So if you know if she's getting money from the Israeli lobby, you already know where she's going to be on that issue, right? So now they're melting down because they kind of pumped up their audience to believe that, like, hey, we kind of got something here. Like, we have joy and momentum again, and we think we can get this done with Kamala Harris, and she's going to be so much better than Joe Biden. And that interview happened and things just came crashing down.
So I'll start with Red MAGA in this case. They think like, yeah, we insult her and her sex habits and call her a slut. Yeah, all my friends love it. Yeah, good luck with that strategy.
Exactly.
Right? But
Terrible
that's not gonna get you any independent voters, you knuckleheads.
Exactly.
Okay, so now on Blue MAGA, it doesn't matter what Kamala Harris does. This was even more true of Joe Biden, right? Oh, yes, queen, yes, queen. Oh, she's so great. Oh, everything she does is great. Okay, yeah, if you're a Democratic voter who's like, thought Biden was amazing, you'll believe anything, but the election isn't, to Anna's point, going to be decided by you. We already know how you're gonna vote. And independents don't think she's the ass queen, right? That's why right now she's losing. It's by a tiny amount, but she is losing in the swing states. So you're not helping with all the Yaz Queen nonsense.
I totally agree with you. Okay, so look, the only thing I'll say about her statement about the Green New Deal, look, it was broad, it was a vague statement, and it was intentionally vague. The only thing that was specific was, kind of citing the Inflation Reduction Act and the climate-related provisions within that policy. And I would just say to Kamala Harris, be a little bit careful with piggybacking off of what was accomplished during the Biden presidency or what Biden has proposed himself. So this year he put out his own economic proposals and Kamala Harris just kind of tacitly co-signed onto those policies without considering that, well, maybe those policies, some of them might not be very popular. And we're gonna get to that later on in the show. But let's move on to the next clip that we have from this interview with Dan.
1 second and then we'll fast forward. Thank you so much, JB. One thing I want to add to that as well. The reason why she's piggybacking off of Joe Biden's policies is because she doesn't really have any of her own. And that's another thing, like that interview last night. What did you get from that discussion last night? Except for we know how she'll be with Israel and Gaza. She made that very clear. But did you get an idea of what her policies are going to be if she wins? Did you get an idea of that at all? Did you walk away with, other than Israel and Gaza, did you get any idea of what Kamala Harris's plan is for America? Right? So something to think about. We're going to fast forward to this part here. Yeah.
Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed.
So she's, putting out a pretty, I wouldn't say conservative message on immigration, but certainly a little more hardcore on stopping undocumented immigrants from entering the country, stopping human smuggling, stopping drug trafficking, all of that. I personally think that is a good message, but I'm curious what you think, Cenk. And do you think that this is a value that has also shifted?
So she's in a super tough spot here because they blew it on immigration for a long time. And this one's inarguable because not only the numbers go sky high, we saw the numbers, don't argue with numbers. You sound like MAGA if you argue with numbers. But now it's come down a little bit. But one, they got stuck with that. And two, now their response is, oh, we're gonna do Trump's policy. It's not a great look any way you cut it. So she doesn't have a good answer here. So in that context, the answer she gave is fine. Mm-hmm. She's pointing out her previous good work on the border, right, as a prosecutor, et cetera. And she went after some of the worst people who crossed the border. And she's saying, look, I still believe that. A lot of people won't be satisfied with that answer because of what we saw in the last 4 years and et cetera, but it's as good an answer as she can give, so I don't mind it.
Yeah, and I think that she messaged on immigration a little more successfully during her DNC speech. And because she focused on, look, we need a pathway to citizenship, and I agree with that. I mean, our immigration system is broken and it's incredibly difficult to enter the country and become a citizen legally. And so focusing on that is important, but also communicating that you're not just gonna allow the type of situation we had in the country, last December, for instance, where the border was out of control. Remember, guys, Biden actually did implement an executive order after Donald Trump crushed the Senate bill that was seeking to reform immigration, right? So Biden's moves, that executive order is what led to a significant decrease in the number of people trying to enter the country illegally. So if she wants to maybe focus on that, that could also be helpful. But this is the one area where I believe her. I actually believe that she does want to do something about immigration. So
yeah, because it would be politically disadvantageous not to do it.
Exactly, yeah.
Everybody say they want to do something about immigration. Let's move on to this part here about the Republican. This part is, I've heard this conversation about immigration since I was a kid. Bill Clinton talked about it. I mean, like Obama, everybody talked about immigration, but they still haven't fixed this problem.
In particular, in mine, we got 68 days to go with this election, so I'm not putting the cart before the horse, but I would. I think it's really important. I have spent my career inviting diversity of opinion. I think it's important to have people at the table when some of the most important decisions are being made that have different views, different experiences. And I think it would be to the benefit of the American public to have a member of my cabinet who was a Republican.
Woo!
So I thought that was a fascinating answer. And my response to that would be, well, it depends on who we're talking about and it depends on the position. So if we're talking about a neocon, never Trump Republican as the Secretary of State, that would be a disaster. Okay, that would be an utter disaster. But what do you think about this, Cenk?
Yeah.
So let me show you what TYT is doing, right? So most people that I've spoken to that are on the left took issue with her saying she would put a Republican in her cabinet. And one of the reasons is this: why is it when a Democrat is running for president, they are asked, would you consider putting a Republican in your cabinet? Would you be willing to work with the Republican Party to get things done, right? But you don't see them ask the Republican candidates, would you be willing to put a Democrat in your cabinet? And that is because both of these parties, and I said this before, the Democratic Party has moved further to the right. Even when Barack Obama ran, he ran on some of the things he ran on were kind of populist at that time. But once Obama got into office, even he referred to himself as, oh, we'll show you. We'll show you. Let me show you what Cenk says first.
So it definitely depends. But overall, I hate the framing. And so I actually want to go to a couple of members here who made good points, and then I'll explain what I mean. Rainbow Bright said, every time there's a Democrat running for any office, CNN constantly asks about working with the Republicans or putting Republicans in their administration. That's exactly right, right? I love how smart and educated our audience is. So you don't get it the other way around. Like, you don't get the Republicans being browbeat about, are you going to put a Democrat in your administration? Are you going to put one in your cabinet?
Nope.
Or I mean, imagine the the Republicans actually putting a strong Democrat or progressive in their cabinet, let's say a Secretary of Labor to, not to put down labor, but to actually uplift labor. I can't imagine. I literally can't imagine it, right? So, but the Democrats, they get closer and closer to the Republicans all the time. So I hate the framing. Yep. I don't want to talk about Republicans, and I would talk about, name one, give me a good one. I haven't seen any, right? And I'm running against the Republican Party for a good reason, because the Republican Party is against reproductive rights, against all these things that we care about. So I'm not going to when the Democrats win the election, I don't have to appease Republicans. Now look, you're a president for everyone. That's a different thing. That's about the voters and not these politicians. 10-714.
We'll go ahead and pause there. But yeah, you could tell there's other videos they have too where they were kind of flustered about the way that interview went, but they're not alone. But to the Republican point, right? Remember Barack Obama said this. Oh, we're going back, ladies and gentlemen. We are going way back.
The truth of the matter is that my policies are so mainstream that, if I had said the same policies that I had back in the 1980s, I'd be considered a moderate Republican. I mean, what I believe in is a tax system that's fair. I don't think government can solve every problem. I think that we should make sure that we're helping young people go to school. We should make sure that our government is building good roads and bridges and hospitals and airports so that we have a good infrastructure. I do believe that it makes sense that everybody in America, as rich as this country is, shouldn't go bankrupt because they get sick. So the things I believe in are things that I think most of your viewers believe in.
Little bit of a flashback for you there, guys, when Obama said that he was more like a moderate Republican, right? But when he was running for office, he was talking about hope and change and yes, we can, but no, he was just, standard. He was standard. He said the things that people needed to hear in order for him to win. Now, sure, Michael, we're going over to CNN, right? CNN. Here's others who took issue. Now, sure, Michael, I believe, is conservative, but we're seeing this across the board. And then we're going to get to what Breaking Point said. People who took issue with some of the things that she said during the interview. Listen to what Sure Michael says here.
Sense in parts of America that there's a cultural antagonism against people who live in places where fracking is an issue that matters. So yes, it's about, whether or not she cares about people like you, but I think this is a proxy for that.
I mean, it's thousands of jobs for people who live in Pennsylvania. And when you say that you support the Green New Deal, but you also support fracking, those two ideals are not consistent. The end result of supporting the Green New Deal is to end fossil fuels. You can't say I support this, but also, by the way, you can have your fracking too. And so for people in Pennsylvania, those skeptical folks that are in the middle, that 5% that may determine which way that state goes, they're going to look at that and they're going to say, well, is this political pandering? Is this political expediency? Is the vice president saying whatever she needs to say to potentially win, but she doesn't believe it? And we weren't clear. She did not give a clear or decisive answer in that regard.
I don't make sense.
So, and this is what I was saying last night. I'm like, well, no, there are some things you can't both sides. And you can't both sides the Green New Deal. You can't say I support the Green New Deal, but at the same time, I would not ban fracking. That goes against what's in the Green New Deal. So they're calling that out there on CNN. And now we get to breaking points. Now, remember that Crystal and Ryan, again, like Jake and Anna, Jesus Christ. I'm telling you, I got to get out of Boston. I got to get out of here, man. I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm starting to lose certain consonants. Anyway, like Jake and Anna, Crystal and Ryan, they too were a little bit more excited when it was Kamala that was announced as the Democrat nominee instead of Joe Biden. And they believe that she would be better on some of these issues. So I want you to hear what they had to say.
What made you change that position at the time?
Well, let's be clear. My values have not changed. I believe it is very important that we take seriously what we must do to guard against what is a clear crisis in terms of the climate. And to do that, we can do what we have accomplished thus far. The Inflation Reduction Act, what we have done to invest, by my calculation, over probably $1 trillion over the next 10 years, investing in a clean energy economy. What we've already done, creating over 300,000 new clean energy jobs. That tells me, from my experience as vice president, we can do it without banning fracking. In fact, Dana, I cast the tie-breaking vote that actually increased leases for fracking as vice president. So I'm very clear about where I stand.
And was there some policy or scientific data that you saw that you said, oh, okay, I get it now?
What I have seen is that we can grow and we can increase a thriving clean energy economy without banning fracking.
Okay. So there you go. That's part one. There's 3 parts here that we want to get through. But what do you make of that fracking exchange, Ryan? It's pretty slippery. It's pretty slippery.
It's just tough because the honest answer is I was pandering to the Sunrise Movement and the youth vote, trying to win the Democratic nomination for president in a period where the left was ascendant.
Right.
There it is, right there. Did everybody hear that? That's the real answer, because she was pandering to the left. That was part of the Sunrise Movement. That's the truth. That's the real answer. But obviously, she's not going to say that.
I failed at that. And now I'm doing a different political thing.
Right.
I think if you're not going to be honest about it, like the best approach would be, if you had to, clearly they workshop, like, all right, how do we answer this and not sound like complete frauds?
Right.
To say, okay, look, at the time I thought you needed to ban fracking in order to confront climate change, but now I think you can actually confront climate change without banning fracking. Now, that's a lie. It's not blah, 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 blah. But like, I guess that's the best you can come up with. I don't know how if you were Kamala Harris without saying I was lying because I was pandering to youth voters, like how would you?
I mean, I guess you could frame pandering in a positive light of like, I'm responding to what voters want, right? And at the time, voters were saying, we want you to ban fracking. Sorry, the dog is in here now. She's moving everything. But so you could frame pandering as like being responsive to the will of voters. But no, I think that saying my values are the same, but new information, I realize that we can now do this without banning fracking, I think probably is the best that you can do. And I mean,
which would be a lie, which would ultimately be a lie. But what we had from Kamala Harris, to their point, is pandering. That's what Kamala was doing. She was just basically like saying things that she knew certain groups would approve of to get their support. I don't even know what Kamala actually believes, other than I'll give her this. I think that she's serious when she says she cares about, women. She cares about women's rights and stuff. I believe her on that. I believe she's serious about caring about crime because she was notorious for locking people up, particularly Black men, locking them up, and Black parents. So I believe that. Other than that, I don't know what Kamala Harris stands for. And it has to be something other than forward. We're not going back to this whole Obama style routine again, where you just put a word under someone's name that says something like hope, and people are just supposed to assume that's going to be the thing. Like, what does she stand for? Like, I can tell you, I can say, I know exactly what Jill Stein stands for. I don't have to ask that question. I don't have to say, what does Jill Stein, what is she about? What does she believe? What has she been fighting for decades? What is she, I don't have to ask that question. With Kamala, I have to ask. You should never have to ask, folks. Never have to ask.
Fair to say that
there is that I would like to win the election. And that hasn't changed.
True. True. I mean, I think she could fairly claim that, like, technological developments are changing what's possible, blah, blah, blah. But the part that to me came off as the most weaselly is when she said something like, in 2020, I stood on the stage and said I would not ban fracking or something like that. And Dana immediately was like, yeah, but 3 minutes before that, you were saying the polar opposite, which is kind of the point here. So there's no real wiggling out of this. And she comes back, because this is not the only position that she's changed, obviously.
Right. She ran as Bernie in 2019.
Yeah, for a while. And then also, she starts off supporting Medicare for all because she thinks that's the thing. Then she gets donor pushback. Then she moved off of that even at the time. So, so in any case, I think
her argument was, I flip-flopped on this 4 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I have long flip-flopped on. I moved off this a long time ago. Why are you still bugging me about it?
Yeah.
Now, I think one other thing that I'll say is there is a lot of justified criticism of Kamala Harris, just very clearly shifting her positions depending on what she thinks is advantageous. We were talking about Trump earlier on abortion. Like, he does the same thing, even perhaps even more shamelessly, because is there a position on abortion that he hasn't held at this point?
Right. Not yet.
From Planned Parenthood supporter.
Okay, and then we're going to go forward to the Israel piece, because I want you to hear what they say about the Israel part. Oh, is that the immigration? Hold on. I want to make sure I get to the right part. I'm going to deal with the, we talked about the border. I just want to make sure I'm at the right part. Oh, the racial attacks. I told you what I had to say about that. Here we go, right here. Israel, because they do comment about this too.
In Gaza, he's been doing it for months and months, along with you. Would you do anything differently? For example, would you withhold some U.S. weapons shipments to Israel? That's what a lot of people on the progressive left want you to do.
Let me be very clear. I'm unequivocal and unwavering in my commitment to Israel's defense and its ability to defend itself. And that's not going to change. But let's take a step back. October 7, 1,200 people were massacred. Many young people who were simply attending a music festival. Women were horribly raped. As I said then, I say today, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And we have got to get a deal done. We were in Doha. We have to get a deal done. This war must end.
In the meantime,
and we must get a deal that is about getting the hostages out. I've met with the families of the American hostages. Let's get the hostages out. Let's get the ceasefire done.
but no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth.
No, we have to get a deal done. Dana, we have to get a deal done. When you look at the significance of this to the families, to the people who are living in that region, a deal is not only the right thing to do to end this war, but will unlock so much of what must happen next. I remain committed since I've been on October 8th to what we must do to work toward a two-state solution where Israel is secure and in equal measure, the Palestinians have security and self-determination and dignity.
She's basically repeating, and I already covered this last night, so I'm not going to go over that again, but she basically repeated the same things that Obama was saying years ago, working towards a two-state solution, give the Palestinian people self-determination. That's why I said, again, who is Kamala Harris? What does she believe? What does she stand for? Because she's just repeating other people's talking points. I don't even know if she really believed this on this issue or not. I really don't. But we pointed out last night, she's still continuing that lie about October 7th, about sexual assault on October 7th. That has been debunked multiple times. And even Ryan Grimm is going to call that out because the Gray Zone, Electric Intifada, there have been multiple news outlets that debunked that story. And she's still repeating that. And that is on purpose, ladies and gentlemen. They repeat it so that it'll sink into people's heads so that you will believe it. But it has been debunked multiple times. And you never, till this day, Kamala Harris has not said anything about the sexual assault of the Palestinians and the Palestinian detention center, which has been recorded on video. She has said nothing about the sexual assault of the Palestinians. You think she don't know about that? I'm sure that she does. But it's very, very clear when you listen to Kamala Harris speak during that interview, it was very scripted. It seemed like it was rehearsed. Again, nobody really understands who this woman is. Who are you? Who are you? What do you believe? Stop repeating Obama's talking points. Stop repeating. Like, it sounds like AIPAC sent you a script and you read from it. Who are you? So listen to how they debunk this.
Your thoughts, Ryan?
Well, Dana said some weapons. I know maybe Harris didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah, she
The
didn't even
Biden
say like
administra-
completely weapon.
She just said some weapons. Like
Right.
the Biden administration has even said that they would restrict some weapons, like the 2,000-pound bombs used for offensive purposes. It seems like Harris. People keep saying that Harris is better rhetorically and more empathetic. Where's the empathy there? Like when you're actually not even standing by the tiniest of concessions that the Biden administration, her administration, has made. It seems like she very clearly wants to just. You say she unequivocally, unconditionally, whatever, supports Israel's right to defend itself. Whereas even Biden would say, well, maybe the 2,000-pound bombs dropped on refugee camps, we're not gonna allow that. Or
see, that's a good point that I did miss. That Dana said some of the weapons. Dana didn't say the weapons or all the weapons. She said just some of them. And Kamala's not even willing to say, well, no, I'm not even going to condition some of them, which means that would mean not conditioning cluster bombs, which I explained to you guys what it means to have a cluster bomb. Cluster bomb means that it's not a specific target. That type of bomb can just go like into multiple clusters all over. So those are pretty dangerous. I know Biden was approving some of those to Zelensky a couple of months ago. But those are a big no-no, like our cluster bombs. So I'm glad that he pointed that out because I didn't catch that last night. We watched that. She said some of them. So she's not even willing to do some of them.
At least we won't allow it for like a 2-week pause period.
Well, that's such a great point that she could have really leaned into. I mean, it's kind of bullshit because they ultimately released those weapons, whatever, right? And have given Israel ultimately everything Israel could possibly want and more. But it is enough of a fig leaf to allow her to create some sense of separation, at least from the Biden administration, by leaning into that. Listen, we did this with the Biden, with Joe Biden. we said this is unacceptable, and we did withhold it, and I would keep that option on the table. So there was a way to say this with, there's such concern on this one issue. There's such concern about a clear break with the Biden policy. There's no concern on that and on literally any other issue, but she clearly feels like, or, also maybe just ideologically believes or feels that that's less likely, because I don't think she has ideological beliefs, but she feels this is where the pressure is, as she needs to prove how committed to Israel she is. And she doesn't feel as much pressure from the left for whatever reason, whatever political calculus she's doing, which, by the way, I think is foolish when you look at the polls.
Right.
But yeah, on this one issue, she feels like, I have to just stay lockstep with the Biden administration, not show any sort of, distance. And I think that's an excuse. Like, I see people making that excuse for her. I think that's kind of a bullshit excuse.
And when Dana Bash says that this is what.
Pause for a second. The majority of the party, the majority of Democrat, the majority want, it's 61% that say stop sending the weapons to Israel. 61% of Americans, the poll that I saw recently. So this idea that it's just progressives that want that to happen, that's BS. And Dana Bash knows that. But Dana Bash herself, along with Wolf Blitzer, you got to keep in mind, again, she's very pro-Israel. She has also continued to repeat that lie about sexual assault on October 7th, because she's in that Zionist camp too. So this is why it just, when Crystal said, I don't think Kamala has an ideology, I don't think she does either. That's what I'm saying. Like, who is she? Who is Kamala Harris? What does Kamala Harris want? What does she believe in? What do you believe in, Kamala? Like, I shouldn't have to ask these questions. Even with Obama, we knew. Obama told us who he was, what he wanted, what did he believe? What do you believe in? It just feels like she's just propped up. Like Kamala Harris is just propped up, running on no substance, just an empty suit.
The progressive left wants you to do. It's true that the progressive left wants you to do that, but so does more than 60% of the country.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right.
Approval for Biden's Israel policy is in the 20s. He's less popular on his Israel policy than he is on his approach to inflation and immigration.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right.
And breaking with him would be a political benefit. And then she leans in to the mass rape claim because she understands that there's absolutely no consequences, for saying that, despite the fact that there is not yet evidence of that being the case.
Right.
In fact, Israel's so desperate to produce some evidence. I don't know if you saw this last week.
I did. Yeah.
This Facebook group produced a letter that we now have confirmed is a complete hoax.
Yep.
Making up like the most horrific things, and it spent a week getting shared by prominent journalists, and then the admission that it was actually a hoax was just quietly.
It just gets buried.
Announced. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, on the contrary, we have seen on camera IDF soldiers gang raping a Palestinian prisoner.
Right.
And that somehow
dozens of cases confirmed by Human Rights
organizations.
B'Tselem. Yeah.
So we have lots of documented evidence of systematized sexual assault of Palestinians who are being held in this, prison concentration camp. So bad that even the Israelis felt like, we got to at least pretend like we might prosecute some of these guys, and then come under massive, pressure and huge backlash from their own citizenry. But that somehow never gets mentioned. So I had a question for you specifically, because.
Okay, I want to pause there with breaking points. You can watch the rest of that on their channel there. But even they were just kind of like, and again, they seem to be pretty excited when she first, announced. They seem to be pretty excited about it, but now they're also kind of just like, whoa, what is happening here? This is not what we thought it was going to be like with Kamala. And even this gentleman here, we're starting to see it. It's all over the place. Carlos Maza says the Kamala is brat stuff was fine while it lasted, but a genocide enabler isn't getting my vote. Yeah. There it is right there. The Uncommitted movement. The vice president's statement was morally indefensible and politically short-sighted as the lack of American consequences for Netanyahu's horrific assault on Palestinian civilians in Gaza has emboldened Israel to now invade the West Bank. Vice President Harris must turn the page from one of the most glaring foreign policy failures of our time by aligning with the American majority that opposes sending weapons to Israel's assault on Gaza. Now, to this movement, I said, you know, you guys, this is ridiculous. And it's not everyone that's a part of the movement, but in particular, the co-founders of the movement that are DNC delegates, they not really being serious about not supporting Kamala Harris, because this woman then told you, and they're pointing out the interview here where she said that she would not stop, obviously, sending weapons to Israel. And they're still saying, you know, begging her, you have to not do this. No, she really doesn't have to do anything. And when she told you in private that she was interested in doing it, she was just playing you. That was just her way to keep you quiet and to get you on out of the way. Publicly, she let everybody know exactly what she plans to do. So at this point, my question to the Uncommitted movement is, and if she does not, what are you going to do? Because the reality is you already endorsed her. I'm willing to believe at least those co-founders are going to continue to vote Democrat anyway. You're still going to vote for Kamala Harris. So unless you're sitting up there saying that you are going to do something different, this begging and pleading and the Keith Sweat vibes and the Boys to Men like vibes is really making me feel some kind of way. And I'm starting to think those co-founders of that movement just want a lot of attention. I'm starting to think you guys just want to be on camera, because I'm popping up. I'm seeing you popping up on every other show talking about please, 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 sounding like a broken love song. But you have not yet said what you are willing to do if you do not get this concession. The Abandon Harris movement, however, has said what they're going to do. They've already said, we're not supporting you. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised come November. But you guys are not willing to do that because they were never serious about not supporting the Democratic Party in the end. Does everybody understand this? I said this from day one. What do you mean this movement through the primary? What do you mean I'm not going to support you in the primary? This administration killed thousands of your people, and you're sitting up here saying, I'm not going to support you in the primary, but if you stop the weapons and the ceasefire, you do the ceasefire now, I'll still vote for you in the general. Get out of here, fam. Get out of here. There was never no other plan. There was no plan B. So if you were still going to support the Democratic Party, you were still going to support the ticket, this was a waste of time. And you would have been better off building a coalition with the Abandon Harris movement, who said, no, we are not supporting you, period. That's what you would have been better off doing. But they're not getting a lot of attention. They're not on all these different talk shows. They're not on Good Morning America. Every day I turn around, I'm seeing another co-founder from the Uncommitted movement on another freaking show. Abandon Harris isn't getting that attention because they did not endorse Kamala Harris. You guys endorsed her and you didn't even get anything. You got played. You bought a ticket from a scalper that's not going to get you into the game. So unless you're willing to say, if you don't do this, Kamala Harris, we're going to support Jill Stein. If you don't do this, we're going to support the couch. If you don't do this, we're not going to vote for you. I think you just need to fall back. That's how I feel right now. This is ridiculous. This is absolute, all this begging and crying and what, I can't grow some balls and tell her you're not going to support her, period. But you got DNC delegates that are part of that movement. So they trying to stay within that. They still want to be a part of that bubble. Not to mention, one of them is Rashida Tlaib's sister. So as I said before, if you guys really serious about this, leave the freaking party. There were over 100,000 people in Michigan that voted uncommitted during the primary. And I'm pretty sure those two co-founders don't speak for everyone that's a part of that movement. I know because I interviewed one of them on the show who made it clear that they don't speak for the rest of them. The backlash that Kamala has received from that interview, coming from people that were excited when she was announced as the nominee, you would think that would wake Kamala Harris's campaign up, but no. You don't have to vote for Kamala or Donald Trump. You can vote for Jill Stein. You can vote for Cornel West. You can vote against genocide.